Let's talk about Scrum-based project management. Before getting into Scrum, we were using a defined sequence-based development process, which was like a productive life cycle, where we create requirements first, then we get into design, then in development, and then testing, assuming that during requirement phase only we can know what all is needed. Many times, development projects are not that much productive. When we follow this sequence, we end up into something which is not desired by the market. So the industry started moving from a predictive life cycle based project management approach to an adaptive life cycle based project management approach. In adaptive life cycle, we don't sequence the work, rather we run a small iteration, and inside that iteration, we create a small slice of desired product, and at the end of an iteration we show it to the stakeholder, take their feedback, and then we refine our upcoming directions. In these iterations, at the end we produce a desired product because we are taking continuous feedback. Now in Scrum, we have a process, we have a mechanism which helps us in running this adaptive life cycle. We run sprints in it. So sprint is a synonym of iteration. The only difference is Scrum tells you don't run a sprint more than 30 calendar days. So you can run an exploration cycle up to 30 calendar days. Most of the team runs it for 2 weeks only. So Scrum provides us a container, which is a time box container called a sprint. The time box helps us in creating a sense of urgency, creating focus on the right priorities, and aligning ourselves towards a stakeholder expectation, because stakeholder also knows at the end of a sprint they will get something which they can evaluate and consume. So we create a time box which is a capacity time box of sprint. Inside this sprint, we have people who work towards this development goal. They create working software. So we in Scrum have 3 roles. These 3 roles are distinctly focused roles. A first role is called product owner. Product owner is a guy who remains in touch with the stakeholders. He's like keep talking to them and identifying the right priorities which needs to be built. And he communicates those right priority to the team. As team comes to know about those priorities, they collaborate themselves and figure it out what they all have to work on in order to make those right priority converted into a working software. And in the complete process is facilitated, guided by a role called Scrum Master. So team does all the work, they are cross-functional. Product owner is primarily managing the stakeholder expectation, identifying the right requirement, and Scrum Master facilitating the complete process in Scrum. So let's get into how the sprint gets executed and which produce something workable, evaluatable at the end. The sprint starts with a first meeting called sprint planning meeting. In a sprint planning meeting, we look at a list of requirements. In Scrum, we store all those lists of requirements in an artifact called product backlog. We can visualize product backlog, maybe a wall where all these requirements are written on a sticky notes, usually in an Excel sheet kind of a format, or some format which helps people to collaborate with each other and help in sequencing the work. So in a sprint planning meeting, product owner picks up some items which are top priority items from a product backlog, and he gives it to the team that, guys, can you work on this? Team looks at their background. They looks at what do we have? What kind of capacity do we have in this particular sprint? Is there someone taking leave? Do we have a planned holiday? What all we can do? So they look back to their capacity, and as per that they talk to a product owner and they reach to a balance that out of these items, which all items we can commit to deliver in this particular time box, which is called sprint. Once that discussion is over, then inside the same sprint planning meeting, team collaborates with each other and figure it out what all development activities we need to do to make these items which we have picked up from the product backlog getting converted into something running. So they talk about, do we need to do coding, do we need to do UX work, do we need to do database work, and they create all those detailed tasks which helps them to self-organize, and they put all these tasks into another artifact called a sprint backlog. So sprint backlog is having all the work items which team would be working on during that particular time box. So we can visualize as product backlog may run for multiple months, multiple years, as long as the product is alive. Sprint backlog is only there for that particular sprint. It only contains the work which will help the team to implement the selected product backlog item which they have done in a sprint planning meeting. Once that is done, the team uses many mechanism which helps a pull-based development, which helps them to self-organize. Rather than somebody telling people that you should be working on this item, you should be doing coding today, you should be doing testing today, tomorrow you expect this particular work, they follow a mechanism which helps people to pick up the work. I am free today, I can take something. This work is stuck, I can work on it. And these kind of mechanism many times implemented using a task force. So team make their work visible. They put all the pending items. As somebody picks up the work, it goes into an ongoing. As things get completed, it goes into done. And this task force or visualization of work help team to self-organize. In order to make these things better, Scrum also recommend a one coordination and replanning meeting called Daily Scrum. Daily Scrum happens on the same time, same place every day, and it's a 15 minutes meeting where team shares what's going on inside the product. They talk about what a team member has done in last 24 hours yesterday to make the Scrum goal reality, and what they're planning to do today to make these sprint goals reality. Whatever they have planned in a sprint planning meeting, the sprint backlog get discussed here. And if they stuck somewhere, if there is something which requires help, they raise it as an impediment. And Scrum Master pick this impediment and get it resolved. He's a servant leader who helps team to who removes the roadblocks in the team's path and helps them to achieve their sprint objectives. So we conduct a daily Scrum every day. Conducting these kind of meetings at the end of a sprint, we comes up with a working software which is consumable, evaluatable by the stakeholders. And in Scrum, we call an increment, potentially shippable product increment. The word increment means this product has some total of the previously developed sprint plus this sprint. And this increment get demonstrated to the stakeholder in another meeting called a sprint planning. So we are towards the end now. We want to show, as per our sprint planning, as per our understanding, as per our close collaboration with the product owner during the sprint, we have come up with this working software. And this working software, stakeholder will provide lots of feedback, sometimes new ideas, and these feedbacks and ideas goes to the product owner. And he works with the stakeholders to refine the product backlog further. In adaptive life cycle, since we don't know the requirement, the product backlog, the initial requirement is a continuous refinement process. So product owner during the sprint also works with various stakeholders and refine and keep the product backlog always ready. So when the team reaches to a next sprint, they have clear set of priorities. So this goes to the product backlog through product owner. Doing this, we are approaching the end of sprint. And before we close the sprint, we need to know what went good, what can be improved, and how can we make our development process and Scrum works better. So we have an inspect and adapt meeting which is called a sprint retrospective. In a sprint retrospective, Scrum teams works together and see how they can design the process, how they can modify the process, improve the process to make it better for them, to make it more productive for them. By running these iterations, we produce at the end the complete project objective, the complete product. So it's a simple framework. We start with the sprint planning, we do daily Scrum every day, and we do a sprint review where we show the product to the stakeholders, and we close this with a sprint retrospective. Once the sprint is over, the next sprint starts the next day. There is no gap in between, and we just keep running this cycle. We get into a sprint planning meeting and this keeps going on. The Scrum also talks about 3 artifacts which are simple and quite evident in this particular video. The product backlog is the first artifact where requirements are stored. Sprint backlog is a detailed artifact, second artifact where the tasks related to the sprints are stored, and increment, which is a final output working software where we make these items demoable, consumable and ready. So 4 ceremonies, 3 artifacts and 3 roles. Simple framework, which is just a basic framework which needs for making an adaptive life cycle work for you.